20 minutes of education.
We can probably visualize how physical borders between countries look like. It could be a fence, a net, a huge wall like in some countries, and controlled checkpoints like customs, where you can get official permission to cross the border and understand that you are now in another country. But how does it work in the sky? Are there any markers in the sky that show the borders of different countries? And what do they look like? Borders definitely exist, because civilian pilots, for example, confidently avoid flying over Ukraine's territory, meaning its airspace. And they do the same with the airspace of other countries that are at war. How exactly do they do this, and what do they rely on? What permissions are required to enter the airspace of different countries, and to land a plane on someone's territory? And who regulates and controls all of this? Let's quickly figure it out. Usually, airspace is defined by a country up to 6,000 feet, which is more than 18,000 meters. It's controlled by that country's aviation authority. When planes enter another country's airspace, control is transferred from one air traffic control center to another. These transitions happen smoothly to ensure safe and orderly flights. It turns out that the term endless sky is just a metaphor, because the sky does have borders, not physical but administrative ones. Our world made the rules where the sky is governed by laws, rights, and freedoms. Let's dig a little deeper, or in the context of this episode, let's fly higher. First, let's understand that the entire airspace of the world is divided into different types, called classes. And the main criteria for dividing the airspace is altitude. That is, different altitudes, which in terms of Earth's geography occupy the same space, but sometimes are controlled by different air navigation companies, or even different countries. The proximity of an airspace area to airports and the complexity of air traffic also influence how the sky is divided. Each type of airspace has its own rules and control structures. The main categories internationally recognized range from the most controlled airspaces to those that are hardly controlled at all. First, let's define what controlled airspace is. It's a space where air traffic control has authority to manage the movement of aircraft. In uncontrolled airspace, ATC doesn't do this, and instructions given by ATC in uncontrolled airspace are just recommendations, and they are not mandatory. There are 5 classes. Class A, B, C, D, and E, these are controlled airspaces. Class G, the only class of uncontrolled airspace. Now let's look at Class A. This typically extends from 24,000 feet, about 7,000 meters, and higher, where all aircraft must be under reliable control. There are also speed restrictions, which are limited to 1 Mach, the speed of sound, around 1,230 kilometers per hour. But over there, you won't find any signs like caution, slippery cloud. There are no such signs in the sky. So the speed limit in Class A is literally the speed of sound, and if you go faster than that, you enter the supersonic zone, and Class A is essentially everywhere. Next, we have Class B. This is around busy airports where air traffic is intense. If you could see Class B airspace in 3D, it would look like an upside-down wedding cake. This is because it consists of several layers at different altitudes, each designed specifically for the airport it surrounds. By the way, fun fact, airspaces also have floors and ceilings. The floor is where the airspace begins, and the ceiling is where it ends. It's just a cozy airspace terminology. You're entering the floor of Class B. Class C, D, and E airspaces are controlled less strictly. And Class G, this is uncontrolled airspace. It exists where there is no controlled airspace. Now you might wonder, is there any piece of the sky in the world that doesn't belong to anyone? Well, yes, there is. These areas are over open seas, and they belong to no one yet and to everyone at the same time. They are called international airspace. No country has sovereignty over this region, but planes flying through it still must comply with international rules. And who sets those rules? The controlling organization is the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO. ICAO is a specialized agency of the United Nations. It coordinates the principles and methods of international aviation, promotes the planning and development of international air transport. Also, it simplifies border crossing procedures and generally ensures the safety and orderly growth of this field. ICAO also determines the protocols for investigating aviation accidents. After an accident, an independent commission is formed, headed by the country where the accident occurred. A preliminary report is published as soon as possible, usually within 30 days. ICAO also standardizes customs, immigration, and sanitation procedures, as well as other formalities to facilitate the movement of planes, passengers, and cargo across border. It's clear that ICAO is the leading organization in international aviation, as it holds the only international authority. But this authority only applies to countries that have signed agreements with ICAO. So let me quickly list the countries that are members of ICAO so you can understand what percentage of the world's airspace follow these rules. As you can see from the map, ICAO oversees 99% of the world's airspace. It has 193 member countries. By the way, in the episode about how did passport appear in our world, I mentioned that there are currently 195 independent countries in the world. You can watch this video over there. So, if you do the math, it means that there are only two countries that aren't ICAO members: Liechtenstein and the Holy See, the Vatican. Liechtenstein doesn't have its own airport, and its interests are represented by Switzerland in ICAO. So yes, there is bureaucracy in the sky too. Planes often follow predefined air routes known as airways, which are like maps or electronic documents ensuring safe navigation through busy airspace. Yes, sky can be as congested as roads on Earth. These roads are defined by a network of navigation aids and may cross national borders. And more bureaucracy, pilots and airlines must get permission to cross borders, which actually means submitting flight plans to authorities for approval, especially when flying between countries with different rules or airspace rights. All these bureaucratic details are standardized globally, and the most common international rules for civil aviation are known as the 9 freedoms of the air. The freedoms of the air, also known as 9 freedoms of air transport, are a set of rights or privileges granted to airlines and their aircraft under international aviation law. These freedoms define the rights of airlines to fly in foreign airspace, pick up and drop off passengers, cargo, and mail across international borders. Can you guess which organization established these rights? Yes, it's ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. These freedoms were outlined in 1944 Convention on International Civil Aviation, better known as the Chicago Convention. They form the basic framework of international commercial air routes and are formalized through multilateral and bilateral air service agreements. Initially, there were only 5 freedoms, but over time more were added and many countries approved them. The first 2 freedoms relate to the right of commercial aircraft to fly through foreign airspace and airports without landing, while the other freedoms deal with international transport of people like passengers, cargo, and mail. So, let's break it down. First freedom, the right to fly over the airspace or another country without landing. For example, a flight from New York to Tokyo may pass over Canada, but won't land there. Second freedom, the right to land in another country for non-commercial purposes, like refueling or emergency landings. For instance, a long flight from the US to Asia may stop in Iceland to refuel but won't pick up or drop off passengers there. Shannon Airport in Ireland was a famous example of this, as it was used to be a stopover for transatlantic flights until the 1960s. Third freedom, the right to carry passengers or cargo from the home country to a foreign country. This is like a basic right for international flights. Fourth freedom, the right to carry passengers or cargo from foreign country to the home country. So it's just a natural extension of the third freedom. If you fly passengers to a destination, they'll probably need to return. Fifth freedom, the right to carry passengers or cargo between two foreign countries, as long as the flight starts or ends in the airline's home country. This enables airlines to operate on routes between foreign countries with a stop in their home country. Sixth freedom, the right to carry passengers or cargo between two foreign countries, but with a stop in the airline's home country. Seventh freedom, the right to fly directly between two foreign countries without stopping in the airline's home country. For example, Singapore Airlines might operate a direct flight from Bangkok to Tokyo without stopping in Singapore. Eighth and ninth freedoms, these are the most controversial ones because they allow airlines to operate domestic flights within another country, like without returning to their home country, which is kind of weird. For example, a French airline could operate a flight from New York to Los Angeles without any connection to France. Really strange. Liberal open skies agreements can include many or even all of these freedoms, though they are relatively rare. Examples include the European Union and also the Open Skies Agreement between Australia and New Zealand. By the way, during the Cold War, the Soviet Union and China refused to allow airlines to enter their airspace, which meant flights from Europe to Japan would refuel in Alaska. After the Cold War, the first freedom became almost universal, but many countries still require advance notice and may charge fees, which can be quite substantial. So what about the fees? Often countries charge foreign airlines for using their airports or airspace. The fee per flight can be in the range from $50 to $1,500, depending on factors like the country, distance, the size of the aircraft, and the complexity of airspace management. Complex airspace, like near large airports or busy regions, might add additional charges. For example, in the European Union, the fee can range from $55 to $1,650, depending on the route and the aircraft size. In the US, fees range from $50 to $200 for the transcontinental flights. In India, fees are based on the weight of the aircraft and the distance flown through Indian airspace, typically ranging from $200 to $500 for long international flights. Some bilateral or multilateral agreements between countries may reduce or eliminate these fees. For instance, countries in the European Union or Open Skies agreements might offer lower or simplified flight fee structures. The most expensive routes are usually trans-Pacific flights, like from Los Angeles to Tokyo, which can pass through US, Canadian, Russian, and Japanese airspace. Fees for those flights can range from $400 to $1,500, depending on the country's fee structures and the distance flown in each airspace. Transatlantic flights, like from New York to London, are slightly cheaper, with flight fees from $300 to $1,000, depending on the airspace fees of each country. Domestic flights, like those within the US, for instance from San Francisco to New York, generally have lower fees, like from $50 to $200. But landing is not free either. Airlines must also pay landing fees at airports in foreign countries. These fees vary based on the airport size, location, and infrastructure. Some countries may also charge additional navigation fees for using certain airspace. Fun fact, some countries offer discounts, like a supermarket, but for airlines that fly regular routes or those that frequently pass through their airspace. And there is something good in our world, of course, because non-commercial or humanitarian flights may be freed from some fees or just get the reduced rates. As for the payment method, airlines don't carry cash to pay at the airport, of course. Instead, they pay directly to the air navigation service provider or the appropriate authority of the country whose airspace they use. Payment is usually made electronically or via invoices after the flight.
How exactly do planes avoid war zones? About traffic jams in the sky, about rules for private jets and drones, and which country owns the largest part of the sky in the world. I'll tell you in the next episode of 20 Minutes of Education.
Air borders, which might sound very poetic, are actually more complex and dynamic than land borders, because airspace is a shared, ever-changing resource. Understanding the details of airspace borders is really important for maintaining the safety and efficiency of global air travel. I hope you found this video interesting, and I kindly ask you to share some energy by giving it a like, hitting the bell icon, and of course, leave your thoughts or questions in the comments, because I really value the opinions of such a smart community. And if you watched this video, you're clearly part of this intelligent community, so your thoughts matter. By sharing your thoughts and comments, you're also helping spread my content, and I really appreciate it. So I'll see you in the next video. We'll explore another intriguing topic. And if there is a specific topic you'd like me to cover, just let me know in the comments. See you!